mostly a quorum here. I'll go over a few things for etiquette this evening, and we'll kind of pause and let everybody go through the video for those 7 minutes. And then after that time has elapsed, we'll come back and we'll begin the discussion thereafter. So I'm going to try not to present. Well, I can attempt to present. We'll see how it goes. Just wanting to make sure the internet doesn't drop me again here. So otherwise, what will help is if you keep your video off and your microphone muted, unless you have something to add during the discussion or a question or things like that. Once we get to that portion of this meeting this evening, you're welcome to turn your microphone or your video on for that portion. But for any of the other lesson segments or the YouTube video that we'll show, if you could keep your microphone muted and your video off, that'll help. And generally, it's just good etiquette since there's a lot of folks on the call this evening. As far as attendance this evening, there will be a worksheet activity closer to the end, and that's been sent out in the invite as well, so everybody should have that. You can pull that up, or if you've printed off a copy. And how we'll record attendance is after you've filled that out, after the call this evening, if you'll email that back to me, that's how we'll be recording for this evening, and that'll help me to get everything into e-services so you get your credit for the character. One request I'll make on that additionally is if you'll send your CAP ID number in that email when you send it back to me, that'll help to do a mass one-time data entry as opposed to individually for each cadet. So let's see. That's general things right off the bat. Any questions before we get started? And we have a few announcements, I believe, from some other seniors before we jump into the lesson this evening. Okay, Sergeant Harker.
Colonel Miller is on. Colonel Miller, do you want to start with anything?
So I don't have anything to say other than welcome to everybody. I'm glad you're able to make it tonight. It's been a beautiful day, and hopefully we're going to have a great evening tonight. So I always look forward to these classes, and don't have anything other than that to say. So welcome everybody, and I'm going to sit back and enjoy. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Colonel Miller. No big announcements that I have right now. Just like I said, I've said in the past and sent out emails to you guys. It's trying times that we're going through with the whole situation that we're not together, and this has been coming up on 5 weeks now, or I believe the 5th Monday that we haven't met, or it feels like more. But we, just like you guys, I'm sure that you missed the face-to-face contact, but it's better to be safe and secure in our core or nuclear family units to stay away from the general populace and stay healthy. That way, later on, when we do start training and congregating again around each other like we usually do, that we'll be healthy and we won't have to worry about contracting this disease or anything else. Keep up with your training. I do see some cadets continuing to plug away at those. I know that sometimes behind the computer is boring. I hate being behind the computer, but sometimes I have to do it, partly because of work and schooling and everything else. But fortunately, with the connectivity that we have, that we're able to accomplish a lot of those tasks. I'm continuing to work with the cadet leadership through promotions. So, like I said, I do see some cadets continuing to accomplish those tasks. The cadet staff or your cadet leadership do have the responsibility of being able to host those promotion boards for the Phase 1 and some of the Phase 2 cadets. And so they will be coordinating with you here shortly to get that done. The big announcement I do have to make, but unfortunately we can't do a change of responsibility like we would normally do. But officially, Cadet Arnold is replacing Cadet Butler as the cadet first sergeant. I've talked with those two individuals and then the other cadets that are in line here in the near future to step up to the plate once Cadet Arnold does, at the point in time that he does promote out, so that we do have a continuity in responsibility as far as cadet and first sergeant position. Both the junior and senior cadets to him, I expect you to continue to support your leadership as his guidance and along with the cadet officers continue to push down information to you. And this is all a learning environment, so sometimes there are mistakes that are made, and this is what we're here for, is to learn from those mistakes and better ourselves, not just as followers but as leaders, so that we can continue to carry out the mission that Colonel Miller has assigned for us. And that's all I have for now. Go ahead, Captain Shea. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Tech Sergeant Harker. So good evening, everyone. Welcome to our second official virtual character session. Glad you could all join us this evening. And we've got quite a, I guess you could say, timely topic that we'll be going through this evening. The National Chaplain Corps put out, we'll jump over to it here. Let me start screen share. Okay, let me try that one more time. Here we go. Okay, screen share is up. Y'all should see it coming across now. So tonight we're discussing friendship. And there's an interesting video we'll start to introduce here in just a moment. But I wanted to read this line just so you kind of get an idea of starting to frame what we're going to be discussing this evening. That poets and scientists agree that no man is an island. We are fundamentally social creatures. Our relationships shape our values and contribute to our happiness. And the best relationships involve genuine friendship. So we'll kind of get into that, you know, like what is genuine friendship as opposed to just friendship and other different types of friendship, things like that. So genuine friendship in which we act for each other's good as we pursue a common life of virtue. So in this lesson tonight, we'll explore different types of friendship and the behaviors that cultivate friendship. So we're going to start right in. I'm going to play a YouTube video. It should come through. I'm going to turn on captions so that you can kind of see the words coming across the screen. And you should get the audio fine. So again, just keep your microphone muted and your videos off for this. It'll help with some of the streaming quality, I believe. So that'll be about 7 minutes. Feel free to take notes on things that are interesting to you or things that you want to discuss thereafter. And then we'll pick it up with discussion after. In the event that my video cuts out while this YouTube video is playing, go ahead and have a backup ready to play this YouTube video. It's linked in the email that was originally sent out. And go through and watch it wherever it drops off, and I'll troubleshoot here, and I've got my phone as a backup so I can at least join and keep the discussion going. But that way, just in case the video cuts out, you can still watch it and we'll discuss it thereafter, okay? Again, just as etiquette, we'll use the chat for the most part. If you have questions to or responses to some of the questions we go through, but then there might be an opportunity here or there to unmute your microphone and just share with the group some of your thoughts as we go through this evening. That's my preference, at least, is to hear some of your feedback and thoughts on the discussion questions this evening. So if there's nothing right off the bat, I'm going to check the chat here. Then we'll jump over to the YouTube video. Okay. Yep. Very good. All right. Captions are on. And there's some good suggestions coming up in the chat for everybody, just things you can play with on your end. And we'll start the video now.
At age 17, Aristotle enrolled in the Platonic Academy. he would stay there for 20 years. Founded by the father of Western philosophy, the Greek philosopher Plato, Aristotle was the most promising student around. He asked many questions and answered even more. The exact time of his departure from the academy is disputed, but it's said that he left soon after Plato died due to his dislike of the direction that it subsequently took. In the years following, he would even go on to argue against many of his late teacher's core ideas. It's impossible to say how much Aristotle wrote, but even from the fraction of his work that we have left today, there is a stunning amount of breadth in the subjects he covered. Every field from astronomy and physics to ethics and economics has been influenced by the work of Aristotle. For more than 2,000 years after his death, he has remained one of the most widely read and quoted thinkers in the history of our species. While his impact can still be felt in the many different subjects today, maybe the most accurate of his observations relate to friendship. He saw it as one of the true joys of life, and he felt that a life well lived needed to be built around such companionship. In his own words, in poverty, as well as in other misfortunes, people suppose that friends are their only refuge, and friendship is a help to the young, in saving them from error, just as it is also to the old, with a view to the care they require and their diminished capacity for action stemming from their weakness. It is a help also to those in their prime in performing noble actions, for two going together are better able to think and to act. Aristotle outlined two kinds of common friendships that are more accidental than intentional. The first is a friendship of utility. In this kind of relationship, the two parties are not in it for the affection of one another, but more so because each party receives a benefit in exchange. It's not permanent in nature, and whenever the benefit ends, so does the relationship that brought the parties together. Aristotle observed this to be more common in older folks. An example of this would be a business or a work relationship. You may enjoy the time you spend together, but once the situation changes, so does the nature of your connection. Similarly, the second kind of accidental friendship is one based on pleasure. This one, however, is more common in people that are younger. It's the kind of relationship frequently seen among college friends or people who participate on the same sports team. The source of such a friendship is more emotional, and it's often the most short-lived of the relationships. It's fine for as long as the two parties gain enjoyment through a mutual interest in something external, but it ends as soon as either tastes or preferences change. Many young people go through different phases in their views on enjoyment, and quite often, the people in their lives tend to change as the phase they're in recalibrates over time. Many of the friendships that many of us have fall into these two categories, and while Aristotle didn't necessarily see them as bad, he did feel that their depth limited their quality. It's fine and even necessary to have accidental friendships, but there is far more out there. The final form of friendship that Aristotle outlined is also the most preferable out of the three. Rather than utility or pleasure, this kind of relationship is based on the mutual appreciation of the virtues that the other party holds dear. It's the people themselves and the qualities that they represent that provides the incentive for the two parties to be in each other's lives. Rather than being short-lived, such a relationship often lasts until the end, and there is quite generally a base level of goodness required in each person for it to exist in the first place. People that lack empathy or care for others seldom develop these kinds of relationships because, more often than not, their preference is to look for pleasure or utility. On top of that, friendships of virtue take time and trust to build. They depend on mutual growth occurring. You're a lot more likely to connect at this level with someone when you've seen them at their worst and watched them grow from that, or if you've both endured mutual hardship together. Beyond the depth and intimacy, the beauty of such relationships is that they automatically include the rewards of the other two kinds of friendship. They're pleasurable and beneficial. When you respect a person and care for them, you gain joy from being with them, If they're a good enough person to warrant such a relationship to begin with, then there is utility too. These relationships require time and intention, but when they do blossom, they do so with trust, admiration, and awe. They bring with them some of the sweeter joys that life has to offer. If you're someone who has been read for over 2,000 years, there is usually a good reason. Not everything Aristotle wrote is considered relevant today, and many of his assumptions have since been argued against. But given the originality of his ideas for the time that he lived in, it's hard not to be impressed by his mind. Few names in history are as influential. He taught us to examine the world empirically, and he inspired generations of thinkers and philosophers to consider the role and the value of ethics in the everyday conduct of our lives. For the average person, however, the most relevant of his ideas relate to the importance of good relationships. He was particularly curious about the intention of friendship. While he saw the value in accidental friendships based on pleasure and utility, he felt that their impermanence diminished their potential. They lacked depth and a solid foundation. Instead, he argued for the cultivation of virtuous friendships built with intention and based on a mutual appreciation of character and goodness, rather than on some transactional value. He knew that such a friendship could only be strengthened over time, and that if it did thrive, it would last for life. To Aristotle, few things came close to the value of such a relationship. It makes sense. At the end of the day, the bonds we forge with those close to us directly shape the quality of our lives. We are, and we live through, the people we spend time with. For most things, life is long enough. It is, however, too short for the wrong kinds of friendship.
Okay. Hope that came through just fine for everybody. It was clear on this end, I know. I'm going to turn off the captions now. Okay. Are there any thoughts or reflections just generally before we go into some of the discussion? This really is starting the discussion, I guess. So feel free to share any thoughts you might have or just reflections or something that stood out to you from the video that you might want to spend some more time discussing with the group this evening. And you can use the chat or speak with your microphone unmuted, whichever you prefer. Okay. Quiet group tonight, so far anyway. You guys aren't the kind of kiddos that just call into these meetings, mute your microphone and turn off your video and then do something else while this is all happening in the background, are you?
My daughters are right next to me, so I don't know what the deal is.
Okay. Well, I can appreciate silence to a degree. Oh, we're starting to get responses now. Okay. Yeah. So all right. So we got a couple responses. I'm going to pick on a cadet or two since everybody's being active now. Let's go with some of these are unknowns. You didn't change your names in here. I don't know who some of these unknowns are. All right, Henderson, you responded negative. So in your own words, summarize some of what was discussed in the video or just general thoughts you had about it. Feel free to come on and use your microphone and all that.
It was basically just talking about the different types of friendship that Aristotle identified and how a lot of the things that he came up with are still used today.
Mm-hmm. And some of the other cadets that were responding, can anybody maybe tell me some of their thoughts about each of the 3 types of friendship that were discussed? Let's say Cadet Rubel, Caleb Rubel. What was the first, and what were some of your thoughts on that?
The first type of friendship was it's only like they get something out of it, like normally like in businesses and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that those aren't really good friendships. They're just like, you just have them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was like utility, right? And so we almost probably wouldn't even call this friendship if we're being honest. We might just call these like business partners or associates or colleagues or some other word. But in the context of friendship, it's a kind of utility, right? As they're discussing in the video. So it's kind of interesting to compare it in the veil of friendship using different words. Okay. We have a couple questions just to kind of help keep us guided this evening. So if you're looking at your screen, I believe I'm still sharing. Double check. Yep. Okay. So you should see up on the screen, there's a couple of questions to kind of guide our discussion, and I highlighted the ones that I think we might spend some more time on. So being honest with the group here, and you can use the chat to respond to this. That way we can kind of see, everybody can respond kind of at once, and then we'll go through select responses. But so are most of your friendships based on utility, pleasure, or virtue? And if anybody feels led to kind of jump out there, be bold and courageous, and share with the group with your microphone unmuted about this question, feel free to do that. And others can respond in the chat. I'll leave the screen up for the moment. To go back and look at the chat, I have to switch screens again. So I don't have it set up on dual screen at the moment. So being honest, are most of your friendships based on utility, pleasure, or virtue? I'm going to go back and see if we got anything here. Couple responses in here. Either pleasure or virtue, depending on the situation. Says unknown cadet at 6:33. Virtue. Oh, okay. Interesting question, Meisenheimer. Right. Can someone kind of relay to us or summarize what was kind of discussed on the idea of that third friendship, which was based on virtue? That was friendship of the good, I believe, is the specific verbiage that Aristotle used. But what were they talking about there? What is friendship of the good, or what is a friendship based on virtue? It feels like they could summarize that or recap it for us. Okay, based off of virtue is the close relationship where you've gone through the tough situations together and have stuck it out. Right, yeah, so oftentimes, they were talking about that relationship as tends to be one in which you've endured through a difficult experience or a trying time together and you've pulled through. That tends to strengthen or grow or build this kind of relationship, the friendship of the good, right? And it tends to focus around a person's values or their virtues, right? In other words, you appreciate something like an inherent quality or trait or characteristic of a person. And I don't necessarily just mean like physical, like looking at a person from the outside, right? But like you might appreciate how some of your friends have integrity and are honest, right? And never tell you a lie kind of thing, or other values like that you see inherently in people when you communicate with them, when you hang out with them, you spend time and you get to know them in a way that you kind of know this kind of person is more this personality type or behaves this way, and this type of person, or this friend tends to not be so honest all the time, or has some things up their sleeves, usually whenever they're talking with me about something, this or that, right? So you begin to discern these things, and at least in the context of a person of virtue, it's taking count of those differences and choosing your friendship relationship based upon those which you agree with in other people, right? So you might have similar traits or virtues in that case. Hope that makes sense. All right. They take time, depends on mutual growth, right? It's a friendship of virtue. So that was a good response. That unknown cadet at 634 is kind of summarizing. Okay, let's take a look at the next one here. So thinking of someone with whom you have or might have a friendship of virtue, since we're kind of talking along those lines, which qualities do you admire in that person? So we just kind of talked about what a friendship of virtue might look like. What are some of those qualities that you admire? Just wait for some thoughts and responses. Got some coming in. So we're on this question here again. Thinking of someone with whom you have or might have a friendship of virtue, and which qualities you admire in that person. Right, so Meisenheimer says loyalty, dependability. They're humorous. They have respect. Right, Arnold said also respect for others, right? Henderson. Being public school, there's a lot of people I associate with that I call friends, but I know that I won't talk to them after high school. I think we've all been there at some point, or are there? Okay, these would be the utility friendships, while my closer circle of friends that I'll keep for life are more virtue friendships. Okay, and then Joseph says compassion, right, as far as virtues that you see in others. Work ethic, Alexander says, honesty, respect, compassion. Okay, I'm going to visit the other screen again. Would anyone be willing to share with the group using their microphone and just kind of describe one of these friendships or relationships with the group? Or maybe just there's a, like a funny story or recollection you have based on some of the things we're discussing with a particular friend that you might want to share.
I guess I'll go in here.
Okay, go ahead.
The few friendships of virtue I have are almost exclusively my high school classmates. Most of my new friendships are from college are more friendships of utility because we become friends because we go to work together. Rather than that, but it's kind of frustrating because I've been in college all semester. Then I get home and I'd love to go and see my friends, but I kind of can't. They're only 20 minutes away, but it could be until sometime before the fall semester starts, like right before then, where I'll have a chance to go and see them in person again.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so this is Alexander, right? You're saying that you're saying you have close friends, like friends of virtue that are nearby that you don't visit as much, but now that you're in college,
Yeah,
most friends are utility based.
I'm from New Orleans. I transferred to this squadron because I was going to college at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, and I was quite looking forward to seeing all my high school friends over spring break, and that's not happening.
Right. Okay. So we're just gonna kind of go with the flow here. So for those that are listening, right? I mean, there's a lot of folks on this call right now. I'm sure everybody's got some thoughts or maybe encouragements or ideas to share. So these are interesting times, right? I mean, there's social distancing, and it's like, don't get too close to people, and definitely don't go out if you don't have to, kind of thing. And here we are tonight. Of all things, we're talking about friendship. We're talking about like the one thing that really requires interaction and socializing and coming together, right? And so there's some things I think later we'll mention some of them too, as far as, you know, how is it that we can continue to foster and to encourage and to grow, right? Because it's talking about these friendships of virtue. It requires time and energy and effort. In fact, I heard someone just talking about the idea of discipleship once. And for those of you that may not know, discipleship is kind of like the idea of you bring somebody under your wing, right? You're teaching them, training them, and the idea is that student is becoming more and more like their teacher each day, and through this process called discipling, right? Or teaching, really. And so I've heard somebody say once that discipleship is a thing that requires, if I can remember, it's kind of like two core things, and it's time and energy, really. So it takes effort, it takes hard work to put into, right, investing into this relationship, because there's going to be setbacks, there's going to be things that are harder concepts to learn than other concepts, challenges that are more or less difficult than others, kind of thing. And it requires personal investment and time to put into that, right? And so if there's one thing that we all probably have a little bit more of, it's time, right? We're not traveling as much, we're not moving around as much, probably. And we have resources such as what we're using this evening to communicate and still share and you know, encourage one another, even though we're not face-to-face necessarily, right? I mean, all of you are maybe 2 feet away from me, but really you're not, right? I mean, you're everywhere from North Huntsville to South Huntsville to East West, and or even out of state potentially, right? So it's unique in that way of what this enables us to do. Not to get too far down the rabbit trail. So what are some different things, ideas that you might have, or things that you've already been doing to continue to invest in those friendships of virtue despite some of the distancing, and recognizing that it's not like you can't go visit people still, right? I mean, these are general regulations and things that are going out to mitigate the spread of the pandemic. But I know there's still family members that will probably visit, maybe just not the big social groups or the big social settings. So what are some of the things that y'all are doing to cope and to work through these times and to invest in those friendships of virtue? Let me check the chat again. Okay, awesome. So that might just be something to think about, or continue to think about. We'll kind of revisit that idea closer to the end. So kind of jumping back into some of these questions for the lesson tonight. What sort of things do you expect from your friends, right? Whether you consider your friends to be of a utility type or a pleasure type or a friend of virtue, kind of stepping back and taking a big picture look at all of it. What kind of things do you tend to expect from your friends? And feel free to share again any of the ways that I've previously mentioned. Henderson going on bike rides, awesome. I don't even think we still own a bike. We had a bike at one time. Oh, it's my wife's my mother-in-law's bike, so that's why we don't have it right now. She took it back. So awesome. Being there to listen, right? Absolutely. Takes time, right? Empathy, investing in those virtue friendships. Okay, Awesome. So you expect your friends, right, to support, right, to be there, while also being there yourself to listen, right? Maybe not necessarily expecting something from them that you aren't willing to do yourself. And even I would say yourself first kind of thing, right? It's easy. I had a friend that shared an idea with me once, kind of this analogy of bungee jumping, right? And that you kind of standing back from a distance and watching people jump off using this bungee jump cord, jump off a bridge. You think, you have faith that that cord will hold them, right? Because you've seen them go down and come back up, and they seem fine, right? But when you get up to the edge of the bridge and now you have to strap that thing on yourself, the question is, do you really believe that that is going to hold you? Because if you do believe, right, if you have true faith, you'll take a jump off the bridge, even though it's much easier, I think, sometimes. You kind of standing back and watching everybody else go. So just that idea of, being willing to do those things that you're asking of your friends, yourself as well, as opposed to just, letting them have all the fun, jumping off bridges and stuff with safety equipment. I know this is being recorded, so I don't want anyone to be confused later that we're not encouraging anybody to jump off a bridge. Consult your local safety officer resources before you go do that. Okay. Trust qualities. Meisenheimer, what do you mean by qualities? Kind of put it in little asterisks, made it stand out. So feel free to jump on your microphone here. Tell us what you mean. Oh, correcting. Okay. Yeah, there's a couple typos. Humoresque. Like humorous? I'm not sure if humoresque is a word, but that's cool. It's like a fancy way to say humor, maybe. Okay. All right, we might have belabored that point long enough. If not, again, you're free to open. This is kind of the open forum part of our discussion this evening. And this is being recorded for posterity's sake. So if it's just me talking, people will probably be banging their heads against desks later on listening to this. So it might be more interesting if you chime in from time to time. We're going to step it up to this next group of questions. All right. So somebody give me a verbal on this one, and feel free to respond in the chat as well, other folks. But how can our friends help us live the core values? Interesting question. Right here at the top. How can our friends help us live the core values? Putting us to the values, making sure we do things right. Okay, interesting point, Meisenheimer, right? So this is kind of gets to an idea about virtue, friendships of virtue that is almost like a prerequisite, right? And that you have to kind of see or understand or know that virtue or that quality that's in that other person that they're striving for in order to either come alongside them and agree with it, or to, encourage them in it, right? And so when we talk about how can our friends help us keep the core values, I believe is how the question was phrased, right? Help us to live the core values. Do your friends even know that you have core values that you're trying to live by? I mean, does your behavior and your speech and your actions tell your friends that these are core values that you have inside yourself that you're trying to live up to? Or do the things that you do really tell your friends that there's a different set of values that you're more interested in obliging with, right? During your personal time or whatever. And so it's more than maybe just telling your friends, hey, these are the core values, integrity, respect, volunteer service, and excellence. It's another thing to live those out in such a way that they can observe those values in you and through you, and then additionally come alongside you and encourage you to continue in them, right? So.
If I may,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, this is Cadet Von Spakovsky. I had a friend that he was a really good friend, but we just kind of, after some stuff that happened, I don't really talk to him as much anymore. He was a really good person, and he did help me a lot, but I think we just had conflicting values after some time, but he did help me improve quite a bit.
Hmm.
I mean, working on these core values is, of course, a continuous process, but and sure, we may have had somewhat different core values, but I think he's a good person at heart.
Sure. Yeah. And that's the interesting thing about this, right? Is that as you live these things out, you tend to see pretty quickly where someone else might disagree with you, right? Like if you're always striving for excellence, there's going to be somebody who's not striving for excellence or who thinks they're striving for excellence, but you're striving a little bit harder than they are, and they'll often be offended, right? And this is just something that's kind of part of the pride of that people hold within themselves sometimes, right? Is they get kind of prideful and bitter or jealous of other people, is they see you striving for excellence and they see you achieving and working hard and being diligent. And sometimes that can offend people in a way that they'll kind of try to pull you back down to their level, right? Or say mean things, not hang out with you as much like they might have beforehand, kind of thing, right? So I guess the encouragement through Von Spakovsky is don't let that discourage you from holding fast to the values that you believe in and striving for them with 100%, with all of your heart, mind, soul, and strength. Pursue that thing and do well, because that goodness, that excellence, whatever it is, if it's a good thing that you're doing, that will overcome whatever bitterness or jealousy or hatred that a friend might have against you in time, right? But to go back and to be angry at them in response to their anger, that's not going to help the situation, right? I think we all kind of understand that. So take a look at the chat here. This is really good stuff, guys. Guys and gals, excuse me. I'm from the West Coast, so I say guys where most people would say y'all, and I forget that sometimes. So, all right, let's see. Henderson said that's why you want to choose friends that hold similar values to you. It's a good point, right? Don't necessarily want to be unequally mixed with people that are like, really don't do stuff that you like to do, and but try to hang out with people that generally tend to kind of agree with the lifestyle, the behaviors, the.
Is there value in spending time with people that don't agree with you?
Okay, so my wife is bringing up an interesting point, a good question here, and her question is there value in spending time with people that disagree with you? And I think there might have been a question that was along these lines. It's okay that it came up now. So it's not on the screen, but here's the question again, is there value in spending time with people who disagree with you, and what value might that be? Feel free to respond in the chat, and then if we can get one verbal response, anybody who's really feeling like a go-getter, give us a response to that question. People are saying yes, right? So why yes?
If I may, I believe that talking with people who do disagree with you can help you understand someone else's point of view on a value or a situation. But it's important not to surround yourself with people who would constantly berate you for your values, but it's also important not to surround yourself with a bunch of yes men.
That was really good. I'm glad this is being recorded because that was really well phrased. Awesome. Other thoughts, ideas? A lot of things in the chat here I think everybody can see. right? This is where, like, and I'll just throw in something additionally here, is that hanging out with people who disagree with you, and again, taking into account what von Spakovsky was saying, is that you don't necessarily submerge yourself in these people. You got to come up for air once in a while, kind of thing, right? But you do entertain their perspective and their ideas, right? Because not only can you find how that relates or ties back to your own virtues or values, and you can see maybe where you might be wrong about something, or it's good to have that disagreement, because if you just always think you're right, hanging out with the yes people, as von Spakovsky eloquently put it, how would you ever learn anything? What growth is actually happening, right? People are just saying, yeah, you're right all the time. And the only thing that's really growing in that case might be personal pride, right? And you get to a point where other people just don't really want to hang out with you anymore because you always got to be right, kind of thing, right? Because you've been told that you're right all the time. So it's good to entertain other perspectives, consider what other people have to say, and really think about it in a way that's productive and meaningful and encourages them. That's the whole thing, right? That's the whole point, is that there's this exchange that takes place in which both mutually grow and develop in their personal character, and then as a result of that, individually, there's a friendship bond and a unity that grows as well. Whether it's between people that are 100% with you on your values, or like 50 or 60% on your values, or some other percentage, right?
Now, I don't know if this completely portrays to that, but I have a story a little like that.
Okay.
But it has two friends and me. The two friends were trying to go against each other to have the other one stop being friends with me, and I didn't understand what that was all about. Does that portray with the values at all?
I want to make sure I'm understanding your question. Can you try asking it again for me?
Well, the two friends were going against each other, trying to get the other one to stop being friends with me.
Okay.
Does that portray with the values?
Okay. So you're saying, let's make sure we understand the situation first, and then we'll go. So you're saying that you had two friends, right, that were both in agreement together to stop being friends with you?
No, like the other one was trying to get the other friend to stop being friends with me.
Oh, I see. So you're friends with one of these girls, at least, or these other
I'm friends with both of them. They met together and they decided that they didn't like each other, so they tried to get the other one to stop being friends with me.
Okay. And what's your question in that situation that you're?
I'm trying to ask if that portrays with the values whatsoever.
Oh, like how that compares between the different, like the three different types of friendships we've discussed? Or how it might fit into one of those molds? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah.
Okay. I guess it kind of depends, right? It sounds like a bit of a delicate situation. You might just go to either of the friends, or the three of you get a chance to sit down together, doing something that you like, preferably, right? Maybe just kind of invite them to get together in some kind of format that is amiable to all parties. That way, initially, you're starting in at least on a high note, but be intentional, I guess, about having the conversation of, what is our disagreement, and where is it that we're kind of falling apart, I guess, or is what it might sound like, at least. Or it might just be one of those things that, if the friend that is being encouraged to stop being friends with you disagrees with that encouragement, you might just speak with that friend initially first to see, what is it that the other person is saying, and not in terms of like gossiping about that other person behind their back. I'm not saying do that. I'm saying, but trying to understand what it is that other person is encouraging your friend that you're more friends with to do. And that, I think, will help better equip you to have a conversation that's meaningful with the other person, to just get down to the root of, like, what is it between you and me, this disagreement that you have with me, and how can we maybe resolve it, such that this doesn't adversely affect our other friendships. Right?
Okay, thank you.
Sure. I don't know where that fits in on the friendship scale, right? We're talking about utility, pleasure, and friendships of virtue, and I think, you know, in a friendship of virtue, you have an opportunity here to really develop virtue with both of these friends over the long haul, right? Because it takes time, it takes effort, it takes being willing, right, to look past the things that are offensive and look forward to the things of, you know, a quality friendship down the road, knowing that it's going to take a little bit of work to get there, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Sure. Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Yep. Friends are hard, guys. I'm just going to be honest with you. People have their own free will, right? And whenever there's two separate free wills, they will inevitably at some point collide because people want to do what they want to do, right? And what this person wants to do doesn't always agree with what this person wants to do. So you can kind of see that, but it's okay. Don't give up on people. There's people that haven't given up on you. Just remember that. Okay. All right. Let's see. I know we're getting past 7 o'clock. We might go a little long, but that's okay. We won't take up 2 full hours, but we're going to look at a couple more questions here. Let me just double check and read my notes first, and we might just kind of jump to the activity instead. If you have other thoughts, continue to share in the chat, and we'll review that in a moment. These are just really interesting questions, I felt like, which is why I highlighted a lot of them. We may not have time to go through all of them, but this is something, again, I can send out if you're interested in wanting to go back and think about this reflectively yourself. I was finding them to be quite reflective. I was finding myself to be quite reflective reading the questions. So let's do this. Let's jump to this activity page. Right over here. You should see it up on the screen now. I'm hearing the chat dinging. I'll go back and check that in a second. So you should have received this in an email for the invite for tonight's meeting. And the point here is to pick a couple friends, right? Maybe pick one friend for now. Put their initials there in the left-hand box, and then go through to the right of this matrix and try to answer some of these questions about that friend. What do you have in common? What kind of friendship is this, right? Whether it's one of the three that, like we talked about, is it more of a utility relationship, a pleasure relationship, a friendship of virtue, or a friendship of good, right? And then you can kind of dig a little deeper. What do you admire in this friend? What does your friend admire in you, right? Those are good things to know both ways. And should you deepen this friendship, right? That's almost like a next step question, which is interesting to consider, right? So I'll just, as I'm discussing and going back and looking at the chat, feel free to start filling out this sheet or filling out on a piece of paper if you have it in front of you. The screen's not going to stay here. I'm going to jump back. So you should have a copy of this hopefully pulled up or printed off, and you can kind of start working through it. And then feel free to share after you've gone through with the group. We'll come back to this in a moment. If anybody wants to share some of their thoughts. And the encouragement here too is that after the call tonight, I encourage everyone who's on the call to go back and visit this sheet in your own time and use it as a tool to really assess some of your friendships, right? And kind of weed through and think about your friendship in a meaningful way. If anything on the high side, right, you might find that there's something that you just want to call your friend about and be like, hey, did you realize that we have this in common? And like, I just think this is really cool, right? Or on the other end, you might end up deciding like, I probably don't need to continue being friends with this person, or at least, you know, there's some things we need to probably work on if we're going to continue to be friends, or the last question there, to deepen this friendship, right? So I encourage you all to utilize this however you see fit. Use a colored pen, use a non-colored pen, crayons or pencils, whatever you want to do, right? Have fun with it. And
can you use black highlighter?
black highlighter, that's fine, right? Any kind of highlighter. Whatever works for you. I just think this is a really cool resource that the Chaplain Corps put together And I think I'll be using it myself to look at a few friendships. And you might find other questions as you go through this that you might add to it, right? And you can come back and use it later. This is a good thing to do, I think, just to really think about your friendships in a meaningful way. Most of the time, I don't think we do this. I know I don't do this very often, so it's good. Nice little encouraging quote here from Jim Rohn at the top of the page. You are the average of the 5 people with whom you spend the most time, right? That's not like a 100% true fact. That's just like, an idea, kind of hold it loosely, right? It's not like if I told you, give me your 5 closest friends, I could tell you exactly who you are kind of thing. But generally, this tends to be true, right? That you're kind of an average summation of the people that you spend the most time with. So some people might say, don't spend too much time with your parents. You'll end up just like them, right? That's not necessarily a bad thing either. It's just, anyway. Okay, I'm going to visit the chat. It's been a minute. See what I've missed. And you can be working on that worksheet right now. And if you have any thoughts you want to share as you go through it, just let us know. Yep, share the story. Awesome. That's a good point. Unknown cadet. Still not sure who this is. Right? If you don't spend time with people who don't disagree with you, you're never going to impact people for the better. I think what you're saying is you should spend time with people that disagree with you so that you can be more impactful. How it is you'll be impactful, I don't know. Hopefully for the better, for the good, right? Depends on how you handle that communication as it takes place. Yeah, makes you think more, right? It's good to be challenged. It's good to hit a wall once in a while and figure out how to work through it or around it or over it, kind of thing. Awesome. All right, we had a question there, I think, while we were having that other discussion. Couldn't find the sheet. Arnold, so you might have found it already, but it's in the original email invite that got sent out earlier this morning. It should be in there. I think it was an attachment actually to the email, a PDF attachment. And then there were 2 links within the email. So, and Henderson answered that. Great. See, I'm just reading this a line at a time. And you got it. Great. Awesome. If I just read the whole chat, I wouldn't have had to say what I just said. How about that? Okay. Any thoughts on, we'll switch back over. Any thoughts on this worksheet from anyone? Okay. And again, this is going to be the thing we use for attendance tonight. So it doesn't have to be fully filled out, but whenever we end the call tonight, if you've put some information on this sheet, if you'll email that back to me, it's ben.shea, S-H-E-A, at alwg.us. Okay, so the same email you got the invite from this morning, respond to that with this worksheet and some of your responses, and that's how I'll know that you are on our call this evening, so you can get your character development credit, move on to your next promotion, and go out there and be impactful during these trying times with some of the things you've learned this evening. Hopefully something. Okay. Yes, Benjamin Lambertson, thank you. Send your CAP ID in that email as well. That's really just to help me on the data entry. If you don't end up doing it, it'll just be a little harder for me, so no big deal. Okay. We're going to jump back over here. We're near the end now. It's 7:10. Some other great questions in here. Let's skip over them. We're kind of on the activity, so if you're working on that sheet, feel free to keep working on it. And if you have thoughts to share, feel free to do that. I'm going to kind of start with some of the wrap up. All right, one challenge right here. It's on the center screen. So we're going to end the lesson with a challenge right now. Because of the COVID-19 pandemic, you're probably separated from many of your friends and people you would like to have as friends. using resources available to you. And we discussed a little bit of this, right? Telephone, email, text message, an old-fashioned letter sent in the mail. You know, the postal service is still running. UPS is still delivering packages. So is FedEx, right? You can reach out to a friend or would-be friend and let that person know that what you admire about her or him, and say thanks for motivating you to be a better person. Right. So this is an action item, as we might call it, something for you to do after the call tonight beyond the worksheet that can be impactful. And I encourage everybody to try to do something like this. You might be surprised just how much light and encouragement you can spread and shine on people during these times. So just, you'll know who it is, the person that you're supposed to contact in light of this challenge. They'll come to you. You'll know who it is. And I just encourage you to go ahead and do that in through whatever medium is best to you or you think is best for it. So, okay. Did anybody have any thoughts? Again, finally, I'm going to ask one more time on this friendship worksheet as you've been looking over it. Nothing. Nada. Okay, I'm going to pull up two more things, and then we'll be kind of done and see if there's any announcements. All right. Awesome verse here. You've probably heard it before. Proverbs 27:17. As iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And just for those of you that might be thinking political correctness out there, in the context here, man, here we're talking about, men and women. It's not just, guys. This is talking to guys and gals all together. Iron sharpens iron, and so one man sharpens another. And an interesting idea just about this analogy here is that when you sharpen iron, like a sword or a kitchen knife or something like that, hopefully your kitchen knives aren't necessarily iron, but anyway, stainless steel or something. When you sharpen it, sparks tend to fly, right? And I've heard this, that oftentimes they'll use an oil when they're sharpening iron and other things in order to help with the sharpening process and keep the sparks from flying. So you think about this applied kind of in a spiritual sense to a conversation you might have with a friend, right? When you're rubbing that iron together, sparks will kind of fly. People might get upset. Someone might kind of go off for a while and have to cool down. But when you bring the oil, right, or kind of a spirit of gentleness and humility and love and kindness into that sharpening relationship, it makes the process go a lot smoother, and it helps to keep from too many sparks flying and maybe catching fire or something like that. So just a neat idea. I wanted to share that with y'all this evening. And one other thing I wanted to visit. This is from John 15, 12 through 17. I thought, for me at least, I'm a man of faith. And I wanted to know, as we were thinking about friendship, what is it that God would consider friendship to be like, right? And so this just kind of brought me to John chapter 15. And this is Jesus talking to some of his disciples. He says, "My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." And if you're familiar with the story, Jesus ultimately goes to the cross and he dies, not only for his disciples, but for all those that would abide in him, that would obey this command to love one another and to love and to seek the Heavenly Father. He says, "I no longer call you servants, because a servant," I missed a part. Verse 14, "You are my friends if you do what I command." In other words, right, think about this with your friendship relationships. It's very similar. You can still be friends with people as long as, they're not doing something that is totally outside of or totally disagrees with something that you hold near and dear as a value, right? Like if you tell your friend, "Don't drive my car," and they get in and drive your car and they wreck it, that's really going to have some tough repercussions on the friendship, I would imagine. Not to say it's unreconcilable, but it helps if you just kind of obey the friend and their command, right? So this is the idea. He says, "You're my friends if you do what I command. I no longer call you servants, because a servant does not know his master's business. Instead, I have called you friends. For everything that I learned from my Father, I have made known to you. Kind of sounds like that friendship of virtue or friendship of goodness we were talking about, right? That you're really opening up, you're spending time. And this is after like 3 years of some intense, deep growth with these disciples. And he's talking to them saying, I now call you friends, right? He says, you did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you so that you might go and bear fruit, fruit that will last. In other words, good fruit, right? And so that whatever you ask in my name, the Father will give you. This is my command, he says again, love each other, right? So there's a biblical reference for those of you that might be interested in terms of kind of this idea of friendship like we've been discussing this evening. There's the verses if you want to write it down. Okay. There's a sheet again. I don't know if anybody had any thoughts, but we're kind of reaching the end here. So don't forget to send this to me. That's how I'm going to record your attendance. All right. I'll look at the chat here. I don't think we have anything new. There's a couple things. Different ideas. Love the verse. Great. Humanity in general. Okay. Cool. Any final thoughts from anybody around the chat tonight based on the friendship or things we discussed or something that you want to ask a question and you haven't been feeling up to it, or you feel like you couldn't ask the question and every time you feel like you might, you don't. And I just encourage you right now is the time to ask the question if you have a question you want to ask. So. All right. I'm going to open it up to any senior members that are on the call that might have some closing remarks or announcements before we sign off for the evening. Whether Colonel Miller or Major Guthrie or Sergeant Harker or Lieutenant Anderson. If you don't have anything, that's fine. It's all good. Okay. All right, everybody. I've taken up enough of your time. You've heard enough of me talking this evening.
Yeah. No, I don't have anything.
Okay. Thank you, Sergeant. All the thank yous. Thank you guys for calling in. I really enjoy hearing from you and learning from you. And I grow a lot from these discussions, believe it or not. Just hearing some of what you guys are saying, it really encourages me. So I'm grateful. Awesome. Awesome. Not provoking. Okay, so if there's nothing else, you have your tasks, right? Don't forget to send me that sheet, and then go encourage and love your friends because they're being socially distanced just as much as you are, and they could really use it, right?
Hey, I've got one by from Cadet Chief Master Sergeant Harker. That's a Morgan type one each. If you have any CAC Cadet Advisory Council comments or suggestions or questions or whatever else, just make sure you message her at morgan.harker@alwg.us. Thank you.
Awesome. All right, everybody, that's all for me. People are starting to sign off, so I'm going to sign off as well. Have a good evening. God bless, and we'll see you at the next virtual meeting. All right. Good night.